that all of the teachers that I got to talk to today are very much in the same position of all of us, just trying to figure this out, still want to do what's best, want to do what's best for kids to try to prepare them for college and for careers and for their lives and everything, and just trying to wrap their brains around this, trying to figure out how to do this, and when to use this new technology and when not to use it. There was a lot of conversation about that too, about how there are certain very special things to us as humans and our human experience, and how we don't always need to use technology. So there's that balance, but I won't give too much more away on that. Let's go ahead and get started with this. So I organized this into kind of like oh, dummy, you got to plug it in. Here we go, the technology presenter, and he forgets to plug his clicker in. All right, so I've got this kind of organized into a top 10, kind of like a top 10 list. So at least now, by the numbered circles, you'll at least know kind of how far along I am in my presentation. So number one, I want to keep this one sort of basic here. What is artificial intelligence? What are we talking about? And sometimes I worry about having conversations about artificial intelligence because it's so broad and it's applied in so many different ways. And if it's applied in all of these different ways, and you're talking about this one, and I'm talking about this one, and I'm very passionate about this one, and you're very passionate about this one, we may be passionate about completely different things. And we may not even be talking about the same thing. So I think one important thing to keep in mind is that this is a broad class of technology that is applied in lots of different places. So here's a quick working definition for us to go from. When a computer or a machine processes information and then acts upon that information in the similar way that a human would. When a computer or a machine processes information and then acts on that information in a similar way that a human would. Now, I don't know about you, but I looked at a definition like that for the first time, and at first I was just like, ooh, that just seems creepy. Anybody else look at this and thought that just seems a little creepy? Like, processes information and acts on it in the same way that a human would. But the more that I thought about it, I thought, well, humans are sort of algorithmic, formulaic thinkers. There's sort of a pattern that we use to come to conclusions. There's a pattern that we use to solve problems. I drive to school every day pretty much on the same path. So there's kind of like steps that you can take. And if a machine is able to replicate some of those same processes, then it kind of makes sense that it would be able to do that. See, we're already through number one. That was fast, right? All right, so number two, where is AI in our daily lives? The answer is lots of places, and probably some places that you don't even realize that it is. For instance, your social media feeds. If you're ever on Facebook or something, you ever wonder why you see certain people more than others and why you never see other people, even though you know that they're posting? It has to do with the algorithm, which is run by artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence is in the GPS directions that we get from our map apps. It's in the autocorrect and the autocomplete and our text messaging. Although I don't know about you, but I feel like my autocorrect is a little more like artificial stupidity than artificial intelligence. But it's also in the recommendations that Netflix makes for you to watch new things. It's in the recommendations that Amazon makes for new products. So really, it's kind of all over the place. There are artificial intelligent components of lots of things. In fact, whenever you unlock your phone with your face, it's using artificial intelligence to do that too. So it's really sort of all over the place. And I think it's easy for us to think that since November 2022, when ChatGPT was released into the world, I think it's easy for us to equate artificial intelligence with the AI assistants like ChatGPT. Can I just see a show of hands real quick? How many of you are familiar, or at least have heard of ChatGPT? Okay, pretty close to everybody. All right. How many of you would say that you've used ChatGPT or another AI assistant like it? Have you used it, tried it? Okay, most of you. Very good. How many of you would say that you're a regular user of it? A few less, a little less than half. This is very interesting. The percentages are almost exactly the same as it was with the teachers. I asked the exact same 3 questions this morning, and it's almost exactly the same percentage. So I think that's really interesting. But I think a lot of times people who have learned what this is, that it's ChatGPT, and you're able to ask it to do things for you, right? So you go to something like ChatGPT, and what can it do? It can answer questions. It can summarize things. It can give you a list of something. It'll do creative things like write a short story or a sonnet or a soliloquy or a haiku. Based on the information that it's learned, it can give you life advice, career advice, relationship advice. Of course, it's up to you to decide whether you want to take any of that advice. But it will offer all of those things. And it's all based on all of this data that it's collected and it's learned from. I'm going to get to that here in a second. But the point that I wanted to make on that is that when you have those conversations, we got to remember, again, AI is this great big class of technology. And tools like ChatGPT are just one teeny tiny little bit of it. Even though that one teeny tiny little bit seems to be getting all of the buzz when it comes to artificial intelligence. So that's that. So since we brought this one up, sort of the elephant in the room, the popular product that everybody seems to be talking about, let's figure this thing out. Because if you used this tool and you used it for the first time, or another one like it, of course ChatGPT isn't the only AI assistant. Google's got one called Gemini. Microsoft has one called Copilot. And then a company called Anthropic has one called Claude. And those are kind of like the 4 major ones that are the most capable right now. And so if you open one of these things up at first, you may have looked at, there's a little text box, looks an awful lot like a search engine. And so maybe you thought, oh, well, this is like another version of Google, right? Well, not exactly. Because if you ask it questions or you ask it to do things for you, it creates this very detailed, very custom response. And if you're like me, the first few times that I started using this, I started thinking, is there like a human on the other side of that that's typing all of this? It just seems so human in its response and so detailed and so custom in that way. And so it kind of leads us to ask, how does this even work in the first place? So a couple of things. ChatGPT is what they call a large language model, or an LLM. And so large language models, remember how I said that artificial intelligence is one great big class of technology? Large language models, or LLMs, are one subsection of it. You've got diffusion models, you've got computer vision models, you've got a whole bunch of other different types of AI. But large language models are just one part. They're very popular, very sort of in the news type of artificial intelligence, just because most of us common people haven't had good interactions with them until ChatGPT came along. So they're kind of like the new thing. That's why they're so popular right now. And so how does it work? Well, ChatGPT basically learns by taking a whole bunch of information and then just doing lots of trial and error, trying to make connections between ideas. And so, like it says here, it's looking for patterns, commonalities, consistencies. Like, it's taking all of this information and it's trying to see what usually goes with what. Okay, there's this article here about this topic, but there's this article here, and I keep seeing these 2 words pop up. It's like if you could imagine somebody who doesn't know anything about our language and doesn't know anything about the world, but has to learn just by associating things together, that's kind of the way that this is, only it can move millions of times faster than we can. So that's kind of how the technology works. And when you think about millions of times faster than we can, I mean, that's sort of the speed that our computers today run at. So it's not like that's that much different than what we're used to as far as technology goes. So where does it get its information? What does it learn from? So And a large language model like ChatGPT gets all of its information in a data set. Imagine a data set like an enormous library. Like picture the biggest library that you've ever set foot on. And like everywhere that you look, there are just walls and walls of books. More books than we could probably read in a lifetime. So ChatGPT's data set, or its library, is made up of 300 billion words. And actually that's probably an outdated number, and it's probably a lot more than that now. We're probably getting closer to like 1 trillion words. And so where does it get all of these words? Well, if you read on, so OpenAI is the company that runs ChatGPT, and they've been semi-transparent about what's in their data set. And so they say, in general, they're able to pull lots of publicly available articles off of the web, publicly available collections of books, academic journals, anything that's freely available. Sometimes, like for instance, the government will sometimes release a whole bunch of documents so that, as part of like a legal proceeding. And so sometimes it's pulling those in too. It's pulling in articles off of Wikipedia. It's pulling off posts from Reddit. Have you all been on Reddit before? Like it's kind of a wild and crazy place. And even people's personal blogs on Blogger, where you can go and write just about anything. So it's this wildly ranging, they're basically just trying to get the most information that they can so that the model has lots and lots and lots of data to learn about the world. Picture your library again. Imagine if somebody was born and was put in a library, and the only way they could learn anything about the world was just through what was inside that library. Whenever I tell this to teachers, some of them are like, actually living in the library doesn't sound that bad. But that's basically the way that these large language models learn, is that they're learning about the world through these sources. So one more thing about this, and then we're going to pivot just a little bit. If it's got all of this data, all of this information, how does it get smart? How does it get artificially intelligent? That has to do with parameters. So first of all, I told you earlier that it's like making connections between things, right? It's trying to figure out what goes with what. But then the parameters are the ways that the AI developers are able to adjust what it does, like how it creates information for us, how it interacts with us. And so ChatGPT works off of 100 trillion parameters. And here's how you can think of a parameter. A parameter is kind of like an enormous mixer board. If you all have ever been across a mixer board, like there's one in the auditorium back there, maybe at your church or something, it's got all these little knobs, just like that. And somebody who knows what they're talking about is able to adjust those knobs just right so that they get exactly what they're looking for. And so that's the way that these AI developers are able to adjust the tone, the creativity, the accuracy. Like some of those things, they're able to adjust with parameters. And of course, I could go on and on and on about all of this, but you're starting to get a little bit of a picture of how these things run in the background, right? Little by little. So as far as this technology goes, if you ask the technology futurists, they might tell you that AI could change the world more than the iPhone, more than the internet, and more than electricity. I remember when I first saw this, I thought that sounded a little bit like bluster, but the more that I study AI, the more that I realize that its ability to help us be more efficient and to be able to process information and everything is really kind of unlike anything that we've had before. I don't know if you all have been watching, but on TV there's supposed to be some sort of like special report on one of the major networks that Oprah is supposed to be in charge of, and it's all about artificial intelligence. And they're bringing in some of the big minds when it comes to AI, and Bill Gates is one of them. We all know who Bill Gates is, right? He's the founder of Microsoft. he even said, I wouldn't have even mentioned this except that I thought that this was fascinating. Bill Gates even said that artificial intelligence, this technology, is the most significant technology he will see in his lifetime. And this guy's seen some things, right? So if that's the case, then we're really looking at something. So how is it going to change things? Again, if you ask the futurists, they will tell you that it's going to displace jobs. That it changes how we use human labor and how we use human work. It can alter how we work, making us more efficient. Could boost productivity, increase access to information. That's what, when we're talking about education, that's a good thing. Change the needs of the work world and even change education. And if you talk to teachers, you realize that the change has already sort of begun. And so why are we even talking about this in the first place? Well, I think the reason that you all are here is because you have a vested interest in a child in the education system, in these schools, right? And so why are we even talking about it? Because this technology is going to impact those kids' lives. And when you think about it this way, it starts to kind of blow your mind. So just picture a 10-year-old kid. 10-year-old kid who's going to graduate in 2032, graduate college in 2036, and go out into the workforce. And if they continue to work, and if the world is basically the way that it is now, and they continue to work and continue to get better, maybe hit their professional peak in the 2060s, and then retire in 2079. Let me let that last one just kind of hang in the air. Retire in 2079. That's just wild to consider, isn't it? And so you've got to ask yourself, what's the workforce going to require of these kids by the time that they retire in 2079? How do we even prepare them for that? What can we do right now? It's like, are we looking at the things that we're doing in school in some ways and thinking, I'm just giving them a whole bunch of tasks to prepare them for skills that are going to be obsolete? I mean, lots of us in education are asking ourselves that question. Or am I still giving them some of those timeless skills that are always going to serve them? Or do I need to pivot and do completely different things that are going to start to prepare them for that future? It's like, is there something we can do right now to be able to help prepare them? I've been thinking about this an awful lot over the last couple of years. I think the answer is yes, and I'll share some of those thoughts with you here momentarily. But let's kind of turn our attention to education for a moment. It's kind of the reason that we're all here, right? What are the implications that AI is going to have on education? These are some of the things that have been very much top of mind of the teachers and of the administration and of everybody who's supporting kids in this school district. So, a couple of things that we have to realize. One of them is that artificial intelligence is here to stay. I mean, just because this one tool, ChatGPT, was released and everybody started talking about artificial intelligence, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been around for a long time already. It's just growing by leaps and bounds right now. And sometimes people ask me, well, my goodness, there are so many fads in education. The kind of running joke, especially with teachers that have been around for a while, is that if you see a fad now, all you have to do is just wait 20 years and then it resurfaces under a different name. It's like all of these fads keep coming around. And so I have teachers that'll ask, is AI just another one of those fads? And the answer is that it's not, because it's already a technology that's so sophisticated and it has immediate application to important things that we want to do. And so if that's the case, it's not going anywhere, especially when the trajectory shows that it's going to continue to grow and continue to rise. So it's here to stay. And in schools, I think we have to reckon with the fact that AI tools will cause us to rethink some types of traditional assignments. And I'll tell you where the one big focus area that's really, really tough for teachers right now is student writing, essays, and any sort of writing, because the large language models like ChatGPT are so good at writing, and they're so good at language. And if you think about it, for years and years and years, We in education have used student writing and essays as a way for us to peer inside of our students' brains and to be able to see what they know and to see how they think. We've used it as an evaluative tool, a way to evaluate student learning. But if our tool starts to not produce the results and not give us the information that we need, we've got to start thinking again about, are there better or different ways for us to figure out how much students have learned? And so that's kind of where we are right now when it comes to all of this. And here's the other one, that AI can actually support learning. I think there is a sort of misconception. I'm going to use the word misconception, and I'm going to tell you why I think that's the wrong word. But I think there's sort of a misconception that these AI tools, and just AI in general, is a destructive force in education only, and that it's going to cause kids not to think, not to be able to think critically, and to not grow their creativity and everything. And I've already seen, through my work at schools all around the United States and beyond, I've spoken with thousands of educators at this point in probably 24 states this year. In my career, it's been almost all 50 states, talking to them about artificial intelligence and seeing the ways that they're applying this technology to help students to think, to give them things to think about critically, to push the level of thinking, to push the level of creativity. It's possible if we know how to use it in the right way. That's the big thing that we're wrestling with right now, is trying to figure out how to use it responsibly, how to use it in a way to help students to grow and to think instead of just doing the thinking for them. And so what I want to share with you in our next one, see, we're already at number 5, progressing nicely. The answer, so if the point was AI can support learning, then let's ask this next question: how? How can it support learning? I think that's probably the hard thing for us to wrap our brains around, especially if we're still just learning about AI. And if all we've seen so far is that there's this thing called ChatGPT, and I think that it can probably do all of my kids' homework, and that doesn't seem like a good thing. Well, that's true. That's a reality that we're actually going to touch on here in just a minute. But the other reality is that it can be used in support of good student learning. So what I did was I brainstormed a handful of things that I've seen students do with it, that I've seen teachers do with it, that I've done with it myself, where it can actually boost student learning. So I wanted to just kind of show you quickly a handful of examples of how this can actually work. Let's talk about number 1. It can serve as a 24/7 tutor. If your child, or the child that you're interested in for the reason of being here tonight, is interested in learning about something and didn't have, before technology like this, didn't have a good person to be able to ask, I guess they could go and do a Google search. But if they go do a Google search, they're looking for these publicly available pages on the web, and they're hoping that some human has written about this in a way that makes it make sense to them. But the difference here is that if they do use AI to help explain it to them, then they can ask it in a certain way, get a response that's specific to their question, and then if they have follow-up questions, they can continually ask until they finally understand. Now, of course, with anything that these large language models create and produce for us, we also have to keep a critical eye on it to make sure that it's accurate and to make sure that it's not biased, among other things. We're going to touch on that here in just a little bit. But as far as this goes, if you've got a kid that's curious about something, or if they want to learn something, learn a new skill, learn everything there is to know. I told the group earlier today, I'm a Colts fan. I love watching the Colts. Watch every one of their games every single year. And I keep hearing people talk about how the Colts have what they call a cover 3 defense. They use a lot of cover 3. And I'm like, I didn't play high school football. I don't know what a cover 3 is. I don't have any football coaches in my life that can explain it to me. I could probably try to find somebody. So what did I do? I pulled out one of those large language models and I started asking it everything that I could about the cover 3. And I can't say that I'm an expert on the cover 3 now, but I do know a lot more about it than I did before because I was able to just keep asking those questions. I was able to satisfy my curiosity about it. I think that's a good thing when used appropriately with kids. Here's the other one it can do. It can help students brainstorm. If you've ever talked to a kid who's had to try to write an essay or do some work and they get stuck looking at the blank screen, the blank page, the blank document with the blinking cursor, and they're just looking at that cursor, and that cursor is just blinking at them, almost like it's laughing at them. It's like, what in the world am I going to do next? Were any of you that kid staring at the blank screen with the blinking cursor going, what in the world do I do now? This is kind of like having a writing assistant who can give you suggestions and give you ideas that you can run with. We were just talking at lunch, right, about getting ideas about a topic that gets a kid excited so that they can go do the work. Instead of having that starting point be a barrier to them getting started. Now we use that as sort of like a jumping off point for inspiration so that now it's like, okay, I've got a topic that I'm interested in, let's do this. And then they're able to go and jump off and get started. So that's another thing that it can do. It can also give feedback. So everything that we've read about education theory and pedagogy says that if we're going to give students feedback, tell them things about their work so that they can improve, it's best to have timely feedback. And one of the biggest struggles of teachers is to be able to provide timely feedback because it's time consuming. Talk to an English teacher about grading essays and research papers. It's tedious, and it takes lots and lots of time. But if AI can give us kind of like that first layer of feedback and make it timely, then it's supported by some of that human feedback in addition. Now all of a sudden, students are getting something timely, but then they're also getting something from the brain and the eyes and the heart of a human teacher also. So you get kind of like that combination. So all of the examples I've talked about so far can be done with an AI assistant like ChatGPT, with a large language model like ChatGPT. But the reality is that AI isn't just ChatGPT. Now, there are lots of apps and websites and digital tools that have been created for the education space that can help students through the learning process. Some of them I'm not thrilled with. I think they were hastily put together by people who are more interested in making money on the education system than helping kids. But others are really good. And they take some of the best things that we know about good teaching and learning, and they make it scalable for teachers and students. It makes it so that it's easier to put those great practices into place. This is one of my favorite ones. It's this tool called Mirror Talk. So this is available in a mobile app, or you can do it on like a laptop or a computer. And here's what I love about it. It puts the concept of reflection into practice. See, reflection, what I mean by reflection is it's like doing some work or learning about something, and then afterwards you stop and you think, okay, what did I learn about that? What do I still not understand about that? What am I still curious about? If I'm working on something, I think, how would I do this differently next time? How could I apply this someplace else? You see, all of those questions, if you ask those questions after learning, it makes it stick. And it allows it so that you can apply it to other places in your life. That's called transfer. The problem is that A, teachers don't think about it a lot. B, a lot of teachers don't do it. And C, I think a lot of teachers just don't see the power in it, even though the research says that it's there. So Mirror Talk does it for you. So here's how it works. It's this app. The examples that you see up here are screenshots from the mobile app, but like I said, you can run it on a Chromebook or a laptop or whatever. And so it starts you out, gives you a high five. I don't have these in order. But it goes up here next, and it says, okay, I'm going to ask you some questions, and this is the first question. This is the crucial one. It says, tell me about something that you're working on. So you might be working on a project. You might be writing a research paper. You might have just gone through class and learned about, like the War of 1812. And so all you do is you just tell it about whatever it is you're learning about or whatever you're working on. Then it takes the transcript, it takes like the text of the things that you just told it, and it throws it into an AI model, kind of like ChatGPT, and it tries to come up with good reflection questions that it can ask you. And so then it starts asking you these questions. Like for instance, I did one where I said that I wanted to think about my learning process and the way that I was, as if I was a student, and how I could do it better. And so one of the questions it asked was, what patterns have you noticed in your learning behaviors that either help your progress or hinder your progress? And I thought, oh, that's a great question that I probably never would have considered myself. And so just think, if a tool like this is able to ask kids questions like this, that a teacher either doesn't have time to do or might not think to do, all of a sudden we've kind of like scaled this great teaching practice to everybody with no additional effort by the teacher. Which means that the teacher doesn't have to spend that time doing this, they can spend it on something else that matters. It's kind of a win-win. And so when I see stuff like that, I think this is how we push education forward in some ways with the power of artificial intelligence. Here's another one. This is a teeny tiny little one, but it's so helpful. So this one's a tool called Goblin Tools. And if you read the about part, it says Goblin Tools is a collection of small, simple, single-task tools, mostly designed to help neurodivergent people with tasks that they find overwhelming or difficult. If you know a kid who struggles with, in schools we call it executive function. It's like being able to manage and navigate their life and get through the things that they need to do. And if that's hard, sometimes we put a human, throughout education, we've put a special needs aide or someone next to a kid who struggles with that. And it's a little bit stigmatizing to the kid too. They know that everybody else in class sees that they have to have a special needs aide sitting next to them, no matter how helpful they may be. But if you start to get tools like this, where they can ask some of these questions quietly by just typing it in with their thumbs or typing it in on their keyboard and start to get answers, this starts to empower them to kind of like live their best lives, Like the formalizer. I kind of like this one. Turn your spicy thoughts into classy ones, or vice versa. So it's like if you're thinking something that you think isn't going to be taken very well by somebody else, this is going to help make it a little bit more suitable. The judge. You type in something that you heard someone say, and it's like, am I misreading the tone of this? You think that somebody's mad at you, or think that somebody is, if you're trying to judge the way that they think. The estimator, just tell me how long this is probably going to take. And then the compiler, compile my brain dump into a list of tasks. This is like, I just need to get it out and say it. Okay, now I've said it. Give me a list of things that I need to do. Some of you are probably looking at some of these and going, can I use this too? And the answer is yes. It's a free set of tools that anybody can use at goblin.tools. I know that's kind of a weird looking website, but I promise it's a real thing. And again, this runs off of an AI model. What else can it do? It can bring history alive. This is one of the cooler things that I've seen some of the AI assistants do. So this is a screenshot from a tool called Magic School. And if you haven't heard a whole lot about Magic School, you're going to probably hear a lot about it over this school year. Because Plainfield's gotten a grant to be able to get full licenses for all of the teachers and all of the students of this entire suite of tools that all will help teachers to do teacher tasks using the power of AI, but also help students to do student work through AI also. And this is one of the cooler ones, I think. So this is a student-facing activity. This is something that you would give a student. And so what can you do with this? You create what they call a character chatbot. What it does is you give it the name of a character. In this case, I gave it the name of Theodore Roosevelt, former president of the United States, Rough Rider, champion of the national parks. And so I gave it his name. And so now what's it going to do? The AI is going to compile all of the information that it knows about Theodore Roosevelt along with his mannerisms, his way of speaking, his beliefs about things. It's going to gather all of that information and it's going to pretend like it's him. Now, of course, anything that is said in this is not real, actual Teddy Roosevelt speech, which actually is kind of a cool critical thinking activity afterwards. If students have already learned something about Teddy Roosevelt, then after this chat, the student could sit down and go back through all of their responses and go, based on what I've learned in my history textbooks, would he actually say this? So again, in this case, it's not removing the critical thinking, it's just giving us more fodder for critical thinking. And to be able to ask Teddy Roosevelt a question, even if it's just fictitious, and again, being clear about this to students that this is not actually, we're not like having a seance here, and this isn't like, we're not like channeling Teddy Roosevelt's spirit or anything. But just saying, this is kind of like a pretend version of him based on the things that he has said before. It just adds sort of a new creative twist to the learning process. What else can it do? It can help you visualize. See, another side of artificial intelligence that we haven't even talked about yet is AI image generators. These things are wild. I've got some names of them down here if you want to go check any of them out later. All you do with these is you describe a picture that you want it to make for you. You just type it in text. Type a description of the picture, and it makes it. Some of them are better than others. In fact, in our training today, we saw some pretty weird, pretty poorly made AI images, but sometimes they're really, really good. So how does this apply to the classroom? When I was teaching high school Spanish, I used AI image generators to make tons of images that had lots of my vocabulary words in them. And then my students would describe them, or I would ask them lots and lots and lots of questions. That's something that I used to spend hours doing, digging through pictures on Google Images. And now all I do, and a lot of times the pictures that I found weren't even perfectly exactly what I was looking for. I had to make do. With this, I can ask it for pictures with several of my vocabulary words in it, and it makes something that's usable. In this example right here, this was by an English teacher named Caleb Wilson on the East Coast. I think he's in New Jersey. And what he did here was he had students take a paragraph out of a novel that they were reading, and they put it into an image generator. So they took a paragraph, in this case, can anybody guess what the novel is? Going once? Going twice? Say it again. Treasure Island is a good guess. It's on the right track. What's the other one that's kind of like that? There it is. Yep, Robinson Crusoe. That's what they were using here. Exactly. They took a paragraph out of Robinson Crusoe and stuck it into an image generator. So they're basically saying, take this paragraph and make a picture out of it. And so then afterwards, they looked at the picture and they compared it against the paragraph. And they said, what details out of the paragraph showed up in the picture? Which ones didn't? Did it get anything inaccurate? When you read the book, was this a similar picture to the one that you had in your own mind? All of these great questions that you can ask based off of this visualization. And then finally, there's this. It can help you communicate. Now, this one's been around much longer than ChatGPT has. Microsoft Translator. And this is pretty incredible. I want to show you this quick video clip that shows you how, let's try that again. There we go. Let's see if I can get this thing clicked. This shows you how this thing helps people to interact in multiple languages. If you've ever heard of the UN and how they do their voice, their translations. You can tell that these are all different languages. They're all connected to the same Microsoft Translator session. They're all using the Microsoft Translator app, and they're all connected to the same session. And so whenever they record something, it gets put into the session, and then the person listening in an earbud can hear it in their own language. This is huge. The place where I've found the most impact of this kind of thing, school front offices, where they come in and all they've got to do, and sometimes you can set it up where you have one device, the first half of it is facing you, the second half of it is facing me. You select your language, I select my language, and we just start talking, and it just translates back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's basically unlocking a language barrier. Now, there's a side of me that's very worried about this because I taught high school Spanish for years and years and years, and it starts to make me wonder, like, what my job security is. But I also know that as a language teacher, I know that there's more to a language than just being able to translate it through technology. So I don't worry too much about that yet. But I think that's another fascinating one when it comes to real applications of AI. And so I think you can see here that using AI doesn't just mean turning students over to the robots, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that. Now, of course, are there instances where kids are going to misuse AI? And we're going to touch on that here in a second. The answer is yes. But let's be honest, kids have been trying to avoid work that they found uninteresting or irrelevant for centuries in education, right? That's not anything new. That's not a technology issue. That's a motivation issue. It's just technology puts a new wrinkle into it. I like to compare AI to fire. AI is like fire. Because fire can be used for really good things, right? It can be used to cook, it can be used to keep us warm, it can be used for light, but it can also be destructive. It also can burn down buildings, it can harm people. It just depends on how you're using it. AI is the exact same thing. And what you'll find is that the teachers and the students here and in schools all over the country and all over the world are just trying to find out how to navigate that balance, how to get it right. It's going to take us a little while. We've used technologies for as long as education has been invented. And the nice thing about teachers is that eventually we always get it right, or we get a right enough version of it. And so that's why I'm confident that eventually we're going to get it right. Oh, number 5 took a long time. I've got about, 12 minutes left? Let's work our way through the rest of these. I promise the rest of these won't take as long. This is the big question that's on the lips of every high school teacher and a lot of the middle school teachers, some of the upper elementary teachers that are concerned about the impact of AI in class. What about cheating? Especially the English teachers, especially the social studies teachers. You hear the talk about, what about cheating? And the answer is that we haven't come up with a really good solution to that yet. Because there's some things that are standing in our way. For instance, we do know that, yes, indeed, students can use AI tools like ChatGPT to write essays and do other classwork. They can. It's possible. If you send a student home and you give them an essay prompt, it is possible for them to type it into ChatGPT, to copy it, to stick it into a document, and to submit it. And you talk to a teacher, talk to enough teachers, and you will have found some that have seen kids do it. It's tricky, though, because plagiarism detectors and AI detectors aren't good at catching it. See, for a long time, whenever students would do writing, they do research papers or whatever, and they would turn them in to us, there are plagiarism detecting websites. Probably the most prominent one is called Turnitin. Turnitin has this huge database of student-created work, and all it's doing is it's taking the new work and it's comparing against the new work to see if it looks like any of that. And so now that AI is here, it's easy for us to ask, well, since we had plagiarism detectors, surely we've got AI detectors, right? Well, sort of. We have things that call themselves AI detectors. But the problem is that they're wildly inaccurate. They don't say that on their websites. They don't say that in their product material, but they're wildly inaccurate. Even the best ones only get it right 4 out of 5 times. 20% error rate for the best ones. This is trying to look at text and trying to make their best guess whether a human wrote it or AI wrote it. And it gets even more tricky when you start to realize that sometimes AI influence different parts of it. And so when there's that little bit of nuance kind of all throughout, it starts to get even messier. And the other thing that we're wrestling with right now too is that AI can indeed stand in the way of student thinking and them developing skills. And if you ask me, those are two of the most crucial elements that I never want anything to stand in the way of. I told the teachers this morning, that's the hill that I will die on. Student thinking and student skill development. And if AI does some of the tricky, hard, complicated, difficult work that causes kids to think, or that causes them to develop their skills, if it starts to do some of that for them, then they're not thinking and developing the skills in the same way. And so that's where we need to think really hard about why we even want to use it in the first place. See, I don't know, when you came in here this evening, I don't know if you thought that I was going to try to do a big sales pitch on why AI is the best thing for education. It's not. You did. It's not, though. There's still lots of our traditional practices that will help. But as you saw in some of the examples earlier, there's lots of places where AI can augment and elevate and lift up what we want to do in the classroom. It's just hard sometimes to figure out which one is which, and we're going to need some time to get to it. And there is a little bit of a silver lining to all this. It's that we've been here before. We've been down this road before, especially when it comes to technology. In fact, if you go as far back as Plato, you'll see that Plato was concerned about one particular technology. Do you see it at the bottom? About printed books. Plato says if men learn this, it will implant forgetfulness in their souls. Plato thought that books were going to make us stupid. They'll cease to exercise memory because they rely on that which is written, calling things to remembrance no longer from within themselves, but by means of external marks. Now we see books in a whole different light, right? Let's go a little more modern. This next quote belongs to 1990s math teachers. You got to learn how to do this. You're not going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket. Any of you ever hear a teacher say that one? Yeah. To which I'd say, sorry, 1990s math teachers, this is a supercomputer I carry around in my pocket. And yes, it does have a calculator in it. And then even more recently, one that we're still trying to wrestle with a little bit, we can't have search engines because what if the students just look up all the answers? We're still trying to wrestle with how that impacts education. But like I said earlier, when we start to look at the ways that students might actually use AI to assist their writing, it gets really complicated. Here's an example. Write this essay, don't use AI to cheat. Sometimes I see instructions from teachers that are just this basic, which of course begs the question, but what constitutes cheating? What is cheating, especially when there's this broad range of how it could be potentially used? I showed this graphic to the teachers this morning, and it goes from things that students might do where there's lots of AI involved all the way down to places where there's no AI and no technology involved. And if you look up and down through these, you start to see that there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of gray area. If you just want to say, yes, AI, no AI. AI is terrible, we should never ever use it. This graphic starts to show you that it's a little trickier than that. It's a little more complicated than that. And with the teachers, we identified that the ones at the bottom and the one at the top are things that we didn't want. AI does student work for them with no thought by the student. We don't like that. We want students to think. Student does all work without the assistance of AI or the internet or anything. Well, that's not really preparing them for their future. And so then where do we come down on the rest of this stuff? If you don't like the one at the top and you don't like the one at the bottom, you're stuck in the messy middle. And the messy middle is where it's tricky, and it all depends on what do you teach? What's the level of the kids that you're teaching? What's the content that you're trying to teach? What time of the school year is it? What do students respond to and what don't they respond to? There's all of this stuff that gets into it. But with any one of these, I've shown this graphic to teachers all over the country in a variety of different walks of education. And I've had them, sometimes I'll say, draw a line where you think everything above it is not okay and everything below it is okay. And those lines are all over the place, and it all depends on what they do. It's because kids have different needs. It's all about, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? You might look at the one at the very top where it says, AI writes an essay, but the student edits it based on learning from class. And you might go, well, that's not writing. Well, what if you have a kid who struggles with writing and doesn't even know where to start, no matter how much you work with them, and you just need to start somewhere? And you say, all I need you to do is just look at this essay. I made it with ChatGPT. I just want you to find the errors that you can find in it. Now they're making a decision. They're making decisions as writers. They're starting to grow in the practice of writing, right? So maybe they graduate to the next one. Student rewrites an AI-generated essay with their own ideas for improvement. They read it and they go, this would be better if it talked about this. This would sound more like me if I said it this way. So you see, with any one of these, it all just depends on what are the goals and how are we trying to get out what kids need the most out of it, right? So what are we doing with this? We want to try to prepare kids for their future and not ours. Because we know what our future looked like, right? I mean, today. Today is our future, right? But if we want to prepare kids for their future, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, till 2079, then sometimes we've got to do things a little differently. So how do we get that balance? Have you heard me talking about balance kind of all throughout the night? Trying to get the balance between AI and human right. How do we get that balance right? You just keep asking yourself this question. And it's a tricky one, and it's one that all of us are going to wrestle with for the rest of our lives. How much AI use is okay? How much is too much? And if we want to say how much AI use is okay, well, none. If anybody wants to say that, I might remind you that spell check has been available in Microsoft Word since 1995. And do you know what spell check runs on? It runs on an AI model. We've been getting AI assistance in our documents since 1995. So a version of it we've been getting for a long time. So even there, the question is, how much AI use is okay? All right, I'm going to stop this real quick and start it back over. You know what? I'm just going to tell you about it because we're almost out of time and I want to be respectful of your time. Did any of you see this ad during the Olympics? It's called Dear Sydney. If you watch the Olympics, you probably saw it a million times. It's an ad where a dad talks about how much his daughter loves this track athlete. I can't even remember what all of her names are, but her first name's Sydney. And his daughter is getting into track. She loves track and she loves Sydney and she wants to write a fan letter to her. And so then the dad says, she wants to write this letter and I gotta make sure that we get it right. And so you know what they do? They jump onto Google Gemini. Google Gemini is kind of like ChatGPT. It's another one of those AI assistants. And they ask the AI model to write the letter to the athlete, to Sydney. They ask the AI model to write the letter for the girl. And people watch this on TV, and backlash ensues. Can you imagine why? Think about it. What just happened in that scenario that I explained to you? A kid, idolizes this athlete and wants to tell them how much they idolize it. And what does the dad want to do? He wants to run to Google Gemini and he wants to have the AI create it for the kid because we've got to get this right. We're talking about the balance, right? Would you agree with me in saying that the balance was pretty out of whack on that one? So what could the AI have done better? How could they have used AI better as a tool there? What do you think? This is the part where you can just blurt something out if you want to, if anybody's got anything. Yeah, they could use it to double check for like feedback. I heard another one over here. Yeah, suggest an outline. Exactly, yeah. So give her a little bit of support so that she can do it herself, right? This is the balance that we're all trying to strike. Okay, let me hustle to the big finish here. How do we get this right? How do we maintain that balance? This is the stuff that I've been telling the teachers. Number one, dialogue. We want to hear from kids, and we also want to hear from teachers, and we also want to hear from you. Everybody needs to hear from everybody about what do they think about this and how we get it right. Dialogue. Next, transparency. How do we show how we're going to grade? How do we tell kids how we're going to grade? How do we show them like what our expectations are? That one's right over there too. Being transparent about those kinds of things. And then the other one right here in the middle is definitions. Let's be clear about what we mean about things like cheating. We throw that word around. You saw it in my example earlier. There was that graphic and it says, write this essay, don't use AI to cheat. What do we mean by cheating? Let's be specific there, right? All right. I'm going to tell you this. My 10 things are going to be shortened a little bit. I want to show you this one real quick. I've got 3 slides on this. I've been seeing some of you snapping pictures of the slides, which is cool. I'm going to go through these really fast. So if you want to be able to come back to them, you might snap a quick picture of these next 3 slides if you want to. And this is the question of how can we help our kids? If you've got kids that you care about that go to the school district and you want to do best by them and you want to support them and see if maybe AI can help you or see if maybe you can advocate for them, these are some things that you can do. Number one is that if you use AI, model your own use. This is what I was telling the teachers earlier. Try it out, A, to see if it can be helpful to you, but also B, so you know what you're talking about whenever you talk to kids about it. So you know what it's all about. And if there's something that you hate about it, tell them. And tell them why you hate it. But if there's something that you love that you think is good and helpful, tell them why. Because what they need is trusted adults that are going to help them through this. Number 2 is to support their learning. These are powerful tools that can help provide student support that sometimes we have a hard time providing ourselves. So what I've got there is a list of some real quick prompts that you can ask ChatGPT or another one of these AI assistants. Explain this in a way that a 10-year-old would understand it. I've seen people ask AI that a ton of times, and it's really good. Create a study guide for this. Create a study guide about this topic. Help me to see what I'm missing. If you've written something, or if you're thinking through something. How about this? What are some common struggles? What do people usually struggle with when they're trying to learn this? Or even better, how can I improve this? So just by using that in the confines of an AI assistant can be big. And then here's the last one. Ask about what's right. You know, when it comes to using AI, we got to ask, is this right? Is this good? Is this good for me? Is this good for the student, and why? And if we know why, then we know if the AI stands in the way of the why, we don't want to use it, or we don't want to use it in that way. So you ask questions like, what should you gain from this assignment? Will AI stand in the way of your thinking or developing your skills? Are you making yourself more marketable for the workplace or obsolete? Yeah, maybe we can use AI to skip over this work. But if we skip over the work, do we miss out on learning the lessons that we need to improve ourselves? You know, the human part of it, getting that right. And then finally, can AI help you to be the best version of yourself instead of just doing it for you? Maybe not the best version of yourself, but sort of like an augmented, leveled up version of yourself. And then when it comes to all of this, I think here's one of the big things, and I'll conclude on this, is that whenever we have AI tools that can do the work for us if we allow them to, they can create the product. And you know, education has a lot of products that we ask students to create for us. An essay, a research paper, the answer to a math problem. Multiple choice questions, we're looking for the answers. Those are the products. When AI can create the product for us, it cheapens the product, doesn't it? The product isn't worth as much as it was before. Here's the kicker, and here's sort of like the solution to that. If the product is cheapened, then what do we want instead? We want the process. How did we get to the product? See, this process right here, this is what we can learn from kids. This is how we can see how much they've learned. This is how we can get them talking about what they've done to be able to get to that end point. And honestly, if you talk to experienced educators, most of them love knowing about the process more than the product itself. So if you want to do something that really empowers kids, ask them about the process. How did you get to that question? Or how did you get to that solution? What did you learn? What was hard? What are you proud of? Just like any of that stuff gets the focus back on the process, which is where the learning actually happens. So, there's a lot to take in with this. A lot to process. If you ask me, I'm fairly optimistic about AI. I know that there are concerns that we've got to be aware of, and I think we've got to still be careful. But for me, I think that the power that this can have to help kids to learn, to help individualize, to help provide them with supports that the education system is having such a hard time getting to, I'm pretty optimistic when it comes to that. And the more that I've learned about this school district and how they're investing in these licenses of this magic school and how they're being open to just trying to take this challenge on head on and trying to prepare kids for the future, for their future and not our future, I think you all are in a pretty doggone good place. It was great to get to meet with your teachers, and it was great to kind of talk with them about all of this and